Hello, folks. Welcome to Take Your Hot Seat Challenge to discover an ingredient of your secret sauce. My name is Joe Wesley, and my guest today is.
Dr. Thomas Mallory Hill.
Thank you for being a part of our program today, Doctor. Um, and I say doctor, he is. It's interesting, the audience I bring to the table. And people work hard who are part of this program, work hard to earn what they've done and to go further with it. For those of you who are new to us, thank you for coming on board. For those who are coming back, thank you even more for
Mm.
showing your faith and trust in learning curve of what we can provide for you. For the new people, what we do is I begin by asking my guests, what's your favorite pastime? Because that goes to your passion. And that is something that nobody else can copy. And I'll say it like this: people can copy what you do, but they can't fake who you are. And when a business owner is looking for an advantage in their industry over their competition, if you talk about what you do, anybody else can come along and mimic that. But if one shares their passion via their favorite pastime, Dr. Hill has a unique history that nobody's can lay claim to in terms of education, upbringing, his obstacles. And when I ask what's your favorite pastime, you go into the concept of why is it your pastime favorite and any challenges and what's your joy out of that. And that's the first 20 minutes or so of that our 30-minute program. And then the last 2 minutes, I will ask him about his business and we'll pull together my concept. By the way, this is not rehearsed. It's not scripted. There's nothing of list of information I get from this guy. I don't ask him in a pre-dialogue, tell me about yourself so I can write crib sheets for myself. And if anything, I begin with a blank sheet of paper and I make notes because I have a mind like a sieve. I don't remember anything. I get concepts though. So as I create what I call dots of input that makes sense to me, I'll be looking down, not because I'm nodding off, but because I'm actually writing something. I carry a red pen with me just for that purpose. And then I will come in toward the latter quarter of the dialogue by sharing with Dr. Hill, asking for his confirmation or affirmation, am I off the track or not, in terms of what my impression is and his business. And we'll close out. And anyway, that being said, I'm going to ask Dr. Hill now, what's your favorite pastime?
Over the years, I would say, Joseph, and to your audience, I think reading has always been a pastime. And it's not just the acquisition of information or knowledge, but just being able to get closer and be more self reflective. Um,
I'm going to interrupt you if I can. I hear what you're saying, and it makes total sense to me. I remember when I was 4 years of age, I think I was reading basic words by then. I had no concept of the greater good of the world around me. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to go back a little bit further in the calendar. That, let's say, when did you start reading seriously? Let me ask you that.
I'm going to say, well, since you put it that way, we were I was born in Chicago, and my parents were very heavily involved in education. So we kind of did the homeschool thing plus the public school thing. So
Okay.
I would say maybe 4 or 5, maybe like yourself. But I was also doing math and arithmetic. My dad was a World War II vet, so he was always interested in engineering and mathematics. So um, my penmanship that stinks, but mathematics and calculus and trigonometry, that was top of the order for me.
Why did you like math? What was the draw to you?
Partly because I had a military dad who made us do our timetables every day.
Ah,
And so
okay.
the
Let me.
acquisition of material that he had, yeah, growing up, yeah, he had sets of books like mathematics and science.
I hear that. So there's a certain degree of, I'm going to say, organization, regimentation, perhaps to push it that far in dialogue.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And there are just certain expectations and certain things you do as part of the camp. I would say, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 Spot
Okay.
on.
So when you began reading initially, which came first, math or reading? Different people
I'm
have.
going to say it was the reading because my mother was really influential in me being in theater.
Okay.
So memorizing lines. we did the old Sunday school thing, memorize these scriptures. So it was a combination of here's the text, and then switch off from that to did you get your 12 timetables together? Okay, let me hear
Right.
them. Yeah.
I get that. So I'm assuming when you were part of your church that there were times you would speak up as part of the as part of the program, or no? If you
Yeah, we always had the customary traditional plays and different times of the year, whether it was Easter or Christmas or something. So, or every Sunday there was a review, and if your class was coming up, you had to have your verses together. So, yeah.
was there a certain type of I had my preference reading. I before I got into science fiction, I read something along that line, Thor and things of that nature. Do you have a favorite reading yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because I guess maybe six or seven, maybe the interest in comic books.
Hmm.
There was a magazine, I forget the publisher, was called Highlights. And I guess
Okay,
what the kids do today, like find Where's Waldo or something, there was always find this hidden figure in this particular picture. So
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And folks, I'm making notes. I'm a slow writer, so bear with me on this.
yeah. I think they still may have that magazine Highlights.
Well, I don't know if I see magazines so much, but certainly on the internet, there's a lot of
Mm,
digital things. Which
hmm.
image is different? How do they differ from each other? Or can you spot this or spot that?
That's
So,
correct.
so it's kind of along that same line, I would think,
Yes,
but more
yes,
electronic. Interesting.
yeah.
So when as you matured in life, aged in life, and those aren't necessarily the same thing in my book. I know people who age who may or may not mature, but that's a different storyline, perhaps. Did your reading become more focused or more specific?
Actually, to be honest, you just stimulated another thought, which was now I realize why I went into athletics so heavily as I did at an early age, because it was to get away from the house from reading and doing mathematics. And the funny thing about it, I was a pretty good athlete. And so, back when we were younger, particularly in Chicago, just groups of kids and getting together. And obviously, you wanted to avoid one particular group of kids versus another. So I was drawn to athletics early, but yeah, it was if it's not reading comic books or out playing some
Hmm.
game or with groups of guys, yeah, being on a team, yeah.
Now that intrigues me because athletics, there are people who are drawn to it. Something like for you is more of an escape valve. Where am I on this?
Well, again, it's interesting because part of that, we would say kids who were nerdy,
Hmm.
always in a book, but I also had to show my proudness because I did have a little athletic ability. I was a big guy, but it
Right.
was it was a toss between the two. So I was always a studious person because of the reason I talked about reading and being in plays, but playing and being in athletics was an escape for me.
What is it? I hear that. I was teasing you in part on that, but I could say I get a hint of that perhaps. What athletics did you do?
Uh, we swam, we played tennis, we not a lot of soccer, but more football, wrestling,
Right.
basketball, baseball. We used to call them strike 'em out, or if you didn't have anybody to play with by yourself, you just drew an X on somebody's building, and you had a stick and a ball, and there we go.
I
We
hear
didn't
that.
always have facilities.
So it sounds like you like group activities more than individual activities. I don't see you being a marathon runner necessarily. Yes or
Well,
no?
we did when you're running from gangs, but no, that wasn't the purpose of being a marathon runner. But I think, yeah, team sports, because again, we were always engaged with park district activities. If again, we weren't reading or going to church or whatever. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was the group of kids that we grew up with. Yeah, yeah, it was always involved with teams. Mhm.
I hear that. Now, what was it about being in a group? Because I know others prefer the individual, like golf, the individual kind of thing always involves other people.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. One says, well, I like golf because I don't, my skill is my skill. I have a coach, I
Mhm.
have a this and that, but
Mhm.
ultimately I'd have to rely on somebody who's going to drag their feet on holding the baton to get around the court. So what is it about a team activity that you enjoyed or liked?
I think part of it is, you recognize, or at least I did, I wasn't the tallest, I wasn't the brightest bulb on a Christmas tree, I wasn't, the fastest, but I was an average kid.
Hmm.
And so when you're working as a team, you kind of leverage what one couldn't do versus what somebody else could do. And it
Right.
was always what we would do to advance, that effort. And so I learned that early. Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned different sports. How far did you go? At some point, I know you've done your education. We'll get into that part of your life at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
But having asked that or having said that, was there a particular sport? Some people are good at all sports they do.
Mm.
Others have one that perhaps they do better. Was there anything like that that affected you?
Yeah. For me, it was always wrestling and
Uh,
football and basketball and
okay.
baseball. But it was like, particularly at the from middle school to high school, that transition time.
Hmm.
Um, there were seasonal sports, and like again, it was a Park District thing in Chicago. So whatever the season is, I was involved in that particular sport. It became
Okay.
hard in high school when basketball, which I did in my first 2 years, made the team and was playing frost off, but I always wanted to wrestle. And wrestling and
Okay.
basketball were like the same sport. So it was always
Ah,
when we would
ah.
practice, one group of guys would chide the other group of guys, hey, you guys
Hmm.
aren't tough, or basketball players like this.
Hmm.
And then in the spring, it was the baseball players or spring football. So yeah,
Right. I hear that.
yeah.
Now, do you feel you're reading? You mentioned in part, maybe tongue in cheek, that you got into sports to minimize some of the obligation of the reading, the storytelling. Were you ever involved in a play of any sort?
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, again, going back to from church and being in theater, and that was integrated also later on in pretty much all facets of my life, whether it was something that we did at church or some other group heard
Right.
about. We were in plays, we were young. But when you mentioned that about the reading, the integration of that pastime never really became just a past. It was part of who I was, and
Hmm.
I think when you integrate that, and if you want to still play, play ball, high school as well as I played D3 athletics. Uh, yeah, you had to have your grades. You had to have a sense of your GPA had to be at a certain level, and then just taking that to a step further, if you wanted to excel, and I did a little bit of that as well.
Let me say excel in the sport, excel in academics. I'm not clear on
Both,
that.
both,
Okay.
because again, it wasn't just enough to make your grades to make the team, but there were things like the honor roll, which I did when I was very, very young, and it was always, at least at my house, pleasing your parents. It's always you want to make your family proud, and so you get, we used to call it, well, the letter grades are different now, but
Hmm.
whatever the top grade is, you get a ribbon or some badge or some certificate. We used to call it
Right.
junior achievement. So it was always, striving to be the best, uh, to represent my family. So yeah, it was not just a struggle, but it was a part of the pastime. The integration of both the
I hear
sport
that.
and athletic. Mhm.
Okay, interesting. Now, folks, two things. First off, we'll do a commercial break very shortly, but I say that for the first 20 minutes or so that I will ask what's your favorite pastime to get dots on the table that I can pull together and get an image out of that. My endpoint is not so much the clock. My endpoint is when I filled the sheet up with information, I don't have any more space to write on. So we're going to have to move on now to the business side,
All
which
right.
is good. A lot of information. But before I say that, I'd like to remind people that this program is simultaneously podcast out to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and also introduced into Alignable. And we do ask that you visit the program, that you look at the links to learn more about Dr. Hill, about myself. If you have any questions to either the two of us or any comments, good or bad, please post them because we do audit input. And I actually certainly, I just suspect Dr. Hill does also learn more on negative commentary than as opposed to saying, I think you did a good job. Give us more if you're going to say anything at all. I would request that. I would say please subscribe to my program. We come out on a regular basis. Please share us with your friends, your associates, and again, any questions, get back to us.
Mhm.
So that being said, I'm going to share some thoughts to Dr. Hill, and then I'm going to ask what his comment is. Am I far off the track or not in terms of what he does currently? So what I note is that you talk about making your family proud, probably people who know you, who depend on you, making them feel good about you proud, because it's not going through the motion, but be it performing in front of a religious environment or be it competing
Mhm.
in a athletic environment. It's not just going through the program, it's actually making it work well. So at
Mhm.
this point I'll stop there. Am I far off so far?
No, I think you're spot on.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask you this. What got you in the path to what you're currently doing? I would ask first, provide, they say Dr. Hill, and I would say, well, philosophy, education, history, whatever it may be, and then share with us how you got to this point.
That's an interesting question, Joseph. In that, as I sit in this chair, from the pandemic going forward, I was an
Mm-hmm.
educator, and
Okay.
the country, all of us, were trying to get through how do you teach in public education via this medium.
Right.
And as I gotten older, less active, but also stricken in at my stage of development in my 60s, um, quite a few health challenges. And so one led to another that limited what I was able to do
Mm-hmm.
physically. And I think when you're a teacher, whether it be elementary, middle, or high school, there's a certain amount of activity that you have to be able to deal with. In my
Mm-hmm.
last position as a librarian, which is, I loved it because obviously I was surrounded by books,
Right.
but having been temporarily disabled almost now 30 months, I've
Mm.
had to do a different kind of pivot. And growing up, big previous business experiences were in finance or financial services, along again with education. I'm now embarking on a process and representation of a biotech manufacturer where I'm authorized to distribute their particular health technology. But again, those skill sets, leveraging the teaching and the financial services experiences that I've had, uh, sharing with people that knowledge and wanting them to be the best as themselves as consumers. But I think also for myself as a consumer, as an
Mm-hmm.
aging senior now, uh,
Okay.
different. It's a
Excuse
little
me.
different.
Excuse me. I get caught up in wording, and rather than saying aging senior, I like to believe maturing senior. At least for
Yeah.
me, that's a little bit more something better I can deal with conceptually. That doesn't offend you. I'd rather say it in that manner.
No, no. But the fact that I'll be 69 next month, and I say that without any hesitation, but to be delicate for those who say he can't be that old. Well, I
Hmm.
am, but I
Okay.
also know and recognize that as the body, I'm not immortal, and we recognize that there are different challenges that we all face, be it genetic or otherwise or environmental. Uh, we find ourselves in circumstances that may be limited. For
Right.
me, I've taken those challenges and turned them into ways in which I can maximize, um, you know, doing things and being a contributing factor to society.
I hear that. So I'd like to give some more input through observation if I can. It's interesting
Mhm.
how this ties together. You mentioned, and if I understand directly, you're a doctor of education. Is that
That is
the
correct.
concept there?
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned having illnesses, and not our need to know obviously for that, but you've walked into your current program because in part it's something that has direct value to you. Uh,
Correct.
Now, some people will do a bit, and I'll go back a little bit further on my dialogue, but there are
Mhm.
people who go into a business because they got hired, which makes sense. I mean, the rule of business of any type as an employee, as an owner, is
Right.
keep the creditors happy. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
argue that. So when I'm walking backwards in terms of your past, and I'm looking at my notes now, that when you get involved in something, it's not simply to go through the motion of it. And I hate the word simply only just to go
Yeah.
through
No.
the motion of it.
Mm-mm.
It's, as you say, make your family proud, make your peers proud. It's not just to do it, but to compete to be the best you can be
Hmm.
at what you do and how you
Hmm.
go about it. And be again, one could argue that performing in front of a stage is not the same thing as performing on a football field, but I get the same to you, however it goes, because there's a certain commitment that you're
Hmm.
going to do. what
Hmm.
you need to do. You mentioned just recently, because of illnesses, you've moved in a different direction.
Hmm.
It ties back, and I'm kind of smiling to myself on this one. You went into sports, moving away from having to memorize lines to stand up in front of a religious group. So you're adaptive, you're resourceful, you do what you have to do, but you don't do it as, "Oh, at least I got away from that. Well, since I'm here, let me give the best I can to it,
Hmm.
because I want people to feel good about it. It's not just enough to play at it." So I'm looking at my notes some more, and you like team activity.
Yeah.
Again, be it theater, be it sports, because you can contribute to the common good. And you made a reference
Yeah.
that because of the common value, you can get an outcome much better than individual effort on its own in a
Absolutely.
collective sense. There's a certain enhancement
Yeah.
of what you do to provide where you want to go with that. And let's see, look at one more note. So you like group activities. Oh, you mentioned your mother was in theater. Your father was in the armed services.
Hmm.
So the issue of structure,
Hmm.
the issue of having certain standards of behavior, minimally speaking, is it a part of your life also?
Hmm.
So what is it, with that being said, as a preamble, would you share with us what is it exactly that you offer to your community as a business?
Well, let me take you just a step back, because what's ensconced in what you just said is my parents are both only children, and so the representation of them being in education in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago themselves, while in my family I'm the first to have had a to finish college and have obviously with master's and doctorate degrees, and what goes with that is the honor for my family, but also both my parents were entrepreneurs. So my mom being a cosmetologist, my dad had stores, and so the entrepreneurial spirit was always in me.
Mm-hmm.
Contributing to your community was a big deal for my dad, and being his oldest son, carrying on that legacy. So your contribution, uh, black or white, male or female, to our society, and the things that my dad and other people who were veterans and honorably discharged, for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
it meant something to be part of a community and to
Mm-hmm.
do good. We say today maybe being a force for good. So my businesses are an extension of who I am in terms of being transparent and authentic, and having been in accounting for 40 years, like I say, financial services as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it meant something to me. Sales and marketing is not something I think that it comes natural to people, but I think being in front of an audience, and again being authentic and transmitting the sincerity and the honesty of what you're providing, whatever the goods and services are. But
Mm-hmm.
again, that's something that a head coach does. Um, Whether it be high school or college, that I've had those experiences, coached myself at the high school level in Chicago for a little bit. When you're the head coach, you're the guy or gal in charge. And what I've taken from head coaches, and whether they were academically inclined or not, they loved their children and whatever the
Mm-hmm.
sport is. And what you take away from a person who can give up the time for his or her family to mentor other young people, to build again that
Mm-hmm.
sense of community, boys clubs, girls clubs, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for me and my business, same thing. I'm involved in an industry that I leverage my time. And so building people and helping them have a sense of community, and for the businesses that we represent, but mainly themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph, it's a part of raising an individual's sights to accomplish what they dream and what they want. And I get passionate. I don't know if you notice a change in my voice when you say that, because that's exactly what I do on a daily basis. Is that I'm interested in helping people, and I think what's the model for me is kind of like, when you love your neighbor as yourself. It's a
Mm-hmm.
fun thing for me, and it's also rewarding to see other people win, to see
Mm-hmm.
their families succeed, and to know that you had a small, part to play in that, as much as a head coach does. So
Right.
it's leading and helping, and that's what the organizational doctorate degree helped me do, is to find some model of industry that allowed people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, as my dad used to say, but
Mm-hmm.
also again leave a legacy for the leaders who are coming behind you, to continue to add value to the community and to your
I
business.
hear that, and I thank you for that input. That allow me to shut my mouth up for a few moments anyway. So I thank you for that. But what I'd like to add behind that, again, people who would like more information of the service and or product that you provide, remember to look at the links in the description of primarily the YouTube. I'm not sure how the other programs quite carry that, but if you go to the original YouTube link, it'll be there. And what I'm hearing, and from asking my questions, learning more about you, I would say that most people I've met in business will say, well, they work hard at what they do,
Mm,
and some will even throw in there the creative ones. And I really care about my clients. Who's
mm.
going to admit they don't care about their clients, whether they do or not? But when I get talking with Dr. Hill, for you, it's a legacy. When you
Absolutely.
talk about your father in a proud manner, and I think I'm not ever served in the armed services, so I may misquote this, but I think of the phrases duty, I think of the word honor, and there may be a third word behind that, perhaps also, and it may be a branch of the services, I'm not sure,
Mhm,
but I can see where there's minimally an obligation. But
mhm.
you weren't satisfied with that. You take it beyond that. You
Correct.
like group activity because you like working with people. You like building yourself as you build people around you.
Hmm.
You like the sense of a common good, a common value of
Hmm.
excellence moving forward.
Hmm.
And I suspect that when you talk about the fact that you are in a given industry now that provides a product and or a service that has helped you, you can now give testimonial on top of everything else about you. And you're
Absolutely.
still nodding, so I guess I'm not too far off the
You are
track
not.
here.
You are not.
Okay. So I say this because, again, I think many people are concerned or afraid or not inclined to spend their money as a consumer, as a business owner, because they may be afraid they're not going to get good dollar value for
Yeah.
money spent, even though we don't have a budget on top of that anyway. But I think if anybody's inclined, I'm going to ask you one more time exactly what you provide for those who may want a little bit of a jolt to get a sense of it. Why would one want to consider coming to you? And not because this is what you provide. I think who you are defines why
Yeah.
somebody might choose you.
Yeah.
But if I'm the consumer, why would I want to knock on your door and say, hey, I need, what is it that you offer?
Let me say this, and let me try to bridge 40 years of stuff in a minute or two.
Okay.
Listen, when you represent, because I am one, a consumer, and the last thing any of us wants to do is to be used a current colloquialism. Nobody wants to be ripped off.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to have some goods or services given or sold to them as a manner of just selling something because the representative is looking out for his or her family. Let me tell you
Mm-hmm.
something. And in financial services, I spent years, and I'll do this today still. If you're in the insurance industry, for example, we know, those of us who have been licensed, that there are two basic products you're going to sell. One is best for your family, and one is best for the consumer. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to tell the consumer the one that's best for them because you're trying to take care of your family.
Right.
You know what irks me the most, Joe, is that when you know something as a representative, I don't care if you're at a bank, an insurance company, a savings and loan, an investment company, the consumer doesn't know what you know because you've been trained. But you know
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting is that when the covers get taken back, when the shade is lifted up, and you find out that the industry, I don't mean the people per se, but the industry has developed goods and services that are not for the consumer. I
Mm-hmm.
like letting them know that. I like getting people this information, and that's what I've taken with this biotech manufacturer. Listen, there is a category creator that I represent, and
Mm-hmm.
the product just specifically is called a SIA redox. The
Okay.
manufacturer's name is a SIA, and the product it's a contraction of two words, redox, which stands for reductants and oxidants. And without getting too sciencey, listen, if somebody told you that there was something that will help you turn back on your body, that it can heal itself, and just by the application of this information, the things that are already native in us already,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody knows about it. One, because the technology just arrived maybe 15 years ago, but because of the stabilization and the concepts that have to be given to the consumer, you want somebody to explain it to you. And maybe you don't really get it,
Mm-hmm.
but when you see people's from different situations, as you talked about testimonies,
I can do it. You've got 15 seconds.
go ahead. Well, I just found something that's able to help people, and that's the consumer part of what I
Fair
enjoy
enough.
doing.
I think I managed to trigger the doc. There's a little bit of passion behind that. But I think it's based on a history of sincerity, a history of
Yeah,
legacy, a history of
yeah,
who you are.
yes.
So again, I really want to thank you for being a part of this experience. I've learned a lot about you, thus the value of what you bring to the table. And audience, again, if you have any questions, any comments, please look us up. Please remember again to subscribe to my YouTube podcasting. Please volunteer if you want to discover an ingredient of your secret sauce. People ask, what does it cost me? An hour of your time.
Yeah.
That being said, thank you very much, and we'll be back in touch again soon. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you. Let me make this